Welcome to the Building Podcast. Construction is the only sector where our main players are called contractors, highlighting the importance of the contract between two parties. Many believe that this designation misses the value that our industry delivers and focuses undue attention on many of the wrong priorities. Today, we're going to look at the interface between two contracting parties, exploring the challenges that often exist between two companies of vastly different size and experiences. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Yosof Ewing here, who runs the consultancy called The Contract Coach, to help us examine this interface and present solutions to this often unequal partnership. Yosof, good morning to the Building Podcast.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for having me along.
Not at all.
Great to be here.
So, Yosof, we normally start by asking you just to explain what your organisation is and what it does, so that people have got a chance to understand sort of the angle you're coming from on what we're about to see, and particularly around these contract interfaces, which we know present some challenges to the sector.
Yeah, that's been kind, I would say, challenges the industry which we'll touch on, I'm sure, during this podcast. But to come back to the original question, what my organisation does, essentially, I set up just around 18 years ago now, and it came out the back of my dad had a civil engineering contracting firm, which was unfortunately forced into liquidation in 2005. I set up after a bit of soul searching and mucking around with other areas of contracting, shall we say. And then I decided to do what I said I'd do when I first found out my dad's company was going to be liquidated. It broke my heart, to be honest. And I said at that time that I would change the industry, not having the faintest idea how to do it. So here we are, nearly 19 years later on, 2024, and a hell of a lot of water under the bridge. But I mean, if primarily what my company actually does, and when we talk about the Contract Coach, was a business I actually only set up in 2022, but since 2006 I've been working heavily in adjudication and actually recovering money from the main contractors, or the big tier ones and tier twos and so forth, and having a lot of success with that, and saving a lot of companies from the same fate that my dad's company unfortunately found itself in. So my idea was that if we could actually set up a business that provided solutions to the problems, and the key problem is the lack of education of contractors. Contractors are essentially, when I say contractors, sorry, to be specific, I mean specialist contractors. These are the people who actually are qualified to and do the work in the industry that main contractors and employers benefit from largely, and they are, to me, the industry. I think there's somewhere in the region of about 400,000 in the UK, approximately, and these guys get roundly used and abused and put out of business on an alarming scale, and it's getting worse, based on my own research. And even the stats that come out of the insolvency service and so forth in the UK. So the coaching side was essentially to upskill and give leadership development and the confidence to push back against the main contractors, effectively to rebalance the equation and say, well, look, you want our services, we're the experts, but we want parity in contract. We want to work on an equal footing, and actually the collaboration that Latham and Egan spoke about in the 90s, here we are over 30 years later, and if anything, it's actually getting worse. And I know I don't want to sound nihilistic, but that's all indicators point to it. Yeah, so I hope that answers your first question. I don't want to go into too much. I could talk about this.
Well, let's get on to some questions then. I mean, I think it's you've got a fantastic viewpoint, really, from what you and I would call the underdogs of in terms of contractual skill sets and contractual, where the power often lies in contracts, and yet, as you say, the specialists are the ones who actually have to deliver the really quite intricate projects and work together on site to make these things happen. So I understand the need for parity in contracts, and it is just that, and that's really what I'm looking forward to talking to you about. So Yosof, where do you think, from a sort of the strategic perspective that you often have with your job, what do you think are the key areas that are causing problems in the state of the sector? You talked around insolvencies, but what's causing that? What are the key issues that we need to be addressing as an industry?
Well, as an industry, the backdrop is primarily, and anybody that follows me on LinkedIn will know that I have no massive love for what they call themselves, the tier one contractors, tier two contractors, because as far as I'm concerned, they've set this industry up as an inverted pyramid, with the people at the top dictating to everyone below them, and effectively controlling an industry and breaking an industry, because that's where we're at. The industry's broken. Anybody listening to this who's up on what I'm talking about in here will know what I mean when I say that, because I mean, in the last year, there's 4,500 companies, contracting companies, went insolvent in the UK. I mean, that's 20% of all insolvencies in the UK are construction companies. From a sector wide, I mean, the ratio by sector is by a country mile way ahead of anybody else. Not to mention the fact we've also got 250,000 people will be short in the industry, actual tradespeople, because, and I believe, and anecdotally I've seen that, we've not got any kind of statistics, sorry, to support that as yet, but I mean, it makes sense, you know, the mental health epidemic we have in construction as well. All of these things point to an industry, I would say, that's actually like sick or broken. It needs to be fixed. So when you've got companies like, I mean, take ISG, obviously they're the current villain of the piece, shall we say, with what happened recently. But I mean, if you take ISG, you know, Ernst & Young just published a report last week, and you know, they owed their supply chain £1.1 billion. How can a company that's supposed to be audited get to that level of, you know, eye-watering statistics? You know, and I know from people who are inside, I'm speaking to people who are ex-ISG, who approached me following some of the content I put on LinkedIn, and basically just told the truth was they were told not to report losses upstream. I mean, it's scandalous, you know. But the problem we have is we appear to have an impotent government and a legislature who just turn a blind eye to what I consider, you know, systematic. I mean, I wouldn't say criminality, because I'll probably get sued, but you know, it's not far off it if it was proven. Big if Cathex's lawyers are listening.
Yeah.
But the point is, you know, these guys just get away with impunity. But if they were to actually, you know, to meet people with lives who they've torn apart, you know, like literally torn them apart, all for just doing their job, they didn't deserve this. That, to me, is the number one problem in the industry. And when you take it back to when you talked about contracts and contractors, I mean, when I talk about this in coaching sessions, like my clients are specialist contractors, so they're an expert in what they do, you know, that's civil engineering, plumbing, electrical, and so on, you know. But when it comes to business and contracting or understanding contracts, they obviously lag way behind, and that's understandable. But, you know, the program I've come up with is about educating them on the rights under the Construction Act, for example, which has been there for nearly 30 years as well. 99% of the industry are completely blissfully unaware of what to do, you know, sort of what it means, and you know, how to use it, but not just how to use it, how to confidently use it. And that's what the program I set up came about, just through the frustrations of trying to change the industry and coming up with the same problems over and over again, same things in adjudication over and over and over again. And you think to yourself, well, look, there's a simple solution to this. Like, if these guys knew what the rights were and they knew how to confidently assert what those rights are, then we might see, you know, a pushback. And that's what's happened. You know, the successes that I'm seeing out, the case studies coming at the back of this after only 2 years so far. You know, my ambition is to get around all 400,000 of the contractors. I'm being serious. I'm currently trying to work to ways to scale the program because of the instances in it. And again, you know, a nod to main contractors. You know, they serve their function, but when you've got a main contractor like ISG going in at 0.5% margin on a £2.2 billion turnover, that's not a business. No business operates like that. And you got to think, well, where's your solicitor, your lawyers, where's your financial advisors, where's all these people in this situation supposed to be audited? You know, where are you? I mean, you're supposed to be doing a job of making sure this doesn't happen. Okay, so you know, for me, that needs to be investigated, and I'm pushing on and on and on. I won't stop until we get some form of investigation. That's my plan. In between doing my day job, of course. But you know, I mean, the top 100 main contractors, or the tier ones as they call themselves in this inverted pyramid, they operate on an average 2% margin. That's not a sustainable business model. And the only way they can do that is by screwing the supply chain below them to make ends meet in the name of efficiencies and all this nonsense like Vistry, and they're like, Vistry is 2 profit warnings, because you can't keep treating people like that. Karma comes back, and basic accountancy and basic business model will cause a correction, and that correction, unfortunately, is when these big businesses fold, destroying lives while they do it. We need to fix that.
Yeah. So Yosso, I mean, we've talked around about the impotence of the accountancy profession in being able to audit these things successfully. You've clearly talked about some of the instructions that ISG managers have been told within their businesses to not to be able to report losses in there. How do we go about getting adequate reporting into the sector? How do we actually make this information generally aware to the supply chain so they know who they're getting into bed with?
Correct. Well, there's 2 elements to that. One is the proactive due diligence that I teach our coaching clients, and also things like asking for deposits and better payment terms. Payment terms that don't expose their business, because you're effectively exposing your throat, if you like, to a knife, with some of these guys. And I know it's a very, very kind of strong image or metaphor, but it's true. That is essentially, it used to be, you're sharing risk and opportunity. Now it's you take all the risk, we'll take all the cream.
Yeah.
So you have to do all the work, and effectively, and sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's relative, and I'll come back to the question. But when I say that a coaching client, you're effectively an expert in your field, right? Let's use my dad was a civil engineering contractor. So we're experts in civils and groundworks and so forth, right? Now our clients couldn't do that. So they asked us to come and do that, solve that problem for them, a business need, which simple, basic business need. But in order to do our job, we needed to basically fund their project by giving them our cash flow on an unsecured interest-free loan basis. That's what we're talking about, free finance, that they'll then dictate by telling you what terms to work to do a job that they can't do themselves. And when you look at it like that, it just seems how absolutely absurd our industry is. So that's one of the other things we do in the coaching program. I actually give my clients a set of terms and conditions of business to use out the box for the reason that they can protect themselves before they start. Operate on your terms. Why are you working for somebody on their terms when they can't do what you can do? Are you crazy? It's and it is. It's, and some people say, well, you can't get away with that because the big contractors say if you don't accept our terms, you won't work for us. Good, don't work for them.
Yeah,
If enough people say that to them, we'll change the industry.
I think one of the problems we have in our industry is nobody ever says no, and I've been in that situation before.
Yeah, well, it's the fear of saying no, but that fear is misguided. Sorry, I'm conscious I didn't answer your question in terms of transparency, Mark. The transparency for me, I mean, we look at the way just you as a consumer, you have to have credit checks and all this nonsense that you have to do, the banks, the finance system. That's all rigged for them to suit. Why don't we have something similar where we have mandatory reporting, so that if you're a PLC and you're turning over a certain level of money, particularly if you're working in the public sector, because look at all the money the taxpayer's going to have to front up to deal with the losses that are going to no doubt come when we have to restart all these projects for the taxpayer in and around London and so forth that ISG were on. So to me, if we had some form of credit checking where you could say, like how often do you pay your specialist contractors, or even have a guild or I don't know, some kind of organization, and it's something I'm working on actively behind the scenes, where we have all the contractors in one place, and if somebody's not paying, then everybody knows about it, and that's it. And it's if you're not going to keep your laundry clean, everybody's going to know about it, and that's it. And if you're going to keep screwing over specialist contractors, then everybody in that area is going to know about it. And guess what? You're either going to have to pay more for your works, or you're going to have to get in line and start treating people with respect. We need to flip the switch on this and flip the narrative, and that's what we need to do.
But at the moment we have the credit reference agencies, and I understand that they're meant to see how quickly people are being paid because they're insuring a lot of the debt from some of these larger contractors.
It's not mandatory though, unfortunately.
Yeah, but they ought to see that. It's always said that they have a very good visibility about how long these payments are becoming.
Yeah, but if you've got a company, allegedly, an emphasis on allegedly, that like ISG, who I've been told from somebody inside the organization or formerly inside the organization, that they were systematically told on a wide scale not to report losses. How can a credit agency can't step inside a business?
No.
You know?
The answer is it can't. It can only look and see how quickly those payments are being paid.
Correct. Which brings me to the second limb at that point. So the second limb for me, Mark, is these directors and shareholders and so forth who allowed or turned a blind eye or whatever you want to call it and allowed that to happen in ISG and everybody before them, right back to Carillion. I'll come back to some stats that we have. There needs to be real punishment for that. And I mean jail time, as far as I'm concerned, because ISG went on record last year in the construction news and actually publicly stated that there was no problem with their finances in 14th of November 2023. I know it.
Yep.
Because I republished and printed, screenshotted that article on LinkedIn, and it went viral because people were like, yeah, how could they possibly state that? And then within a year, your £2.2 billion business is up in smoke. While 3 months before it happened, you publicly state we're going to get 100 million investment, and then nothing happens. It's gaslighting on an epic scale, you know. And the people that are involved, all the directors and all that kind of stuff at the top of the tree, effectively just disappear and then pop up in other companies. They're like, I'm sorry, but that shouldn't happen. Yeah. Not. That's not right. You can't. You know.
It's interesting. I mean, so the Building Safety Act is coming in, and we're now getting personal accountability for design.
Correct.
It sounds like you're advocating much more personal accountability for the financial performance of your companies.
Well, the thing is, when you're at that level, you should be. We already have it, but it's just not enforced.
Yeah.
Under the Companies Act, you're supposed to know. So, I mean, for example, I'm not saying it was, again, if the lawyer's listening, but was ISG trading insolvent for the best part of a year? Because how could it possibly be anything else? When you're fudging numbers and moving accounts about, supposedly or allegedly internally, then that needs to be investigated. It's not just the case that Ernst & Young come along and go, I'm afraid there's no money for anybody. What happens to was that money paid, that 1.1 billion, was that paid by the government, for example, into ISG's trough? Where did it go? Because it didn't go to the people who did the work. So the question begs, and I'm saying not that I don't know if Keir Starmer will be listening to this, but the government need to be investigating this on a deeper level than they did for Carillion, and people need to be held accountable. If you're a director of a company that did this, you need to be held accountable, because we did some research internally, and I've just commissioned even deeper research into the state of the market and the state of the industry, because unless we actually get talking about this and get the people in power talking about this, we can't change the legislation, which is something else I want to talk about, the reform of the Construction Act. But we did some research, and I said, look, if we bookend Carillion in 2018, ISG in 2024, in a 6-year stretch, period, I guess, 6-year period from those two basically colossal collapses, right? And you had 1.2 billion for Carillion and now 1.1 billion. So my numbers are actually have to go up by 300 million, because when we reported it was only 800,000. Sorry, 800 million. Sorry, only 800 million. But in comparison to that, so 800 million is now at 1.1 billion, and you had 1.2 billion in direct supply chain losses from Carillion. So if I add on that we calculated there's 42 that we could find online, and the total losses, which I'm now going to correct because there's another 300 million, is 3.7 billion. In 6 years.
4 billion lost in insolvencies, for major insolvencies.
Not too far away, from it. I mean, 3.7 thereabouts, but yeah, it's pushing £4 billion. And you think, like for all of those millions and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, those are thousands of people's companies' lives. And that brings me back to the kind of thorny and sometimes uncomfortable thing that people don't like to talk about. 2 men commit suicide every day in our industry.
Yeah.
And I say it's not rocket science to say these things are connected. Of course they are. There's absolutely no way you can rob a human being of their right and ability to run their business or feed their family, and then there's not going to be ramifications because of that. These are not just like boxes on a spreadsheet. That's people's lives you're destroying. And that's the bit that gets me, is how can people just disappear and all these professional advisors pretend nothing happened? Let's just carry on and then go, oh, that's terrible that happened. I hope it doesn't happen again. Then it does. It's a bit like these shootings in America, and it's a horrible thing to talk about. But these things, Sandy Hooking, is just non-stop, but nothing ever seems to get done. Just ban guns. It's not difficult, you know.
It's the old Einstein projection, isn't it? Keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you've had.
Absolutely. Sorry if I get a little bit frustrated when I talk about these things because
no, well, we've been at it for some time, haven't we? Changing industry. So I mean, just to summarise those 2 points, then, Yosof, we're talking about better transparency in people's accounts and making sure that the people doing that work are independent, probably of even the credit reference agencies, because I'm aware of a number of ones that I've been affected by, and the credit reference agencies are just not reporting any problems at all until the day after they've gone bump. Yeah. And so really we have to find a better way of getting more transparency for the whole supply chain into that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, again, I'm not an accountant, and I'm only speaking from what I understand to be correct. I think it's something like if you're over a certain turnover, I think it's maybe 5 million. I could be wrong, and I'm sure the accountants will correct me on that. But just say, for argument's sake, or the purpose of this discussion, I think it's if you're over 5 million, and you need to be reported, particularly if you're a listed company as well. There has to be like proper checks and balances for that from the market's perspective, stock exchange, investors. Everybody needs to know that the information and the intelligence they're getting is solid. We're literally the Wild West.
Yeah.
You honestly have no idea sometimes. It's like pulling the one-armed bandit. Yeah, there you go. There, because whoever was going to come in and support or save ISG, they walked away, and I'm pretty sure they had the good reasons for that too. That I'm sure that'll come out in the fullness of time.
Yeah. So that's transparency. I mean, the second point then is around about accountability. And I mean, one of the things which I've always, that doesn't amaze me, I marvel at, is that, we've got rid of grandfather rights within our industry. You can't even lay a brick now without an NVQ, but you can be completely unqualified and yet still be a director of a company like ISG. And it does, one of the things I'm amazed, I do ask for is, on some companies I get around, is what's their corporate risk register? And quite often companies don't even have a corporate risk register. And we wonder how ISG managed theirs, because were there any competent directors on board? I have no idea, but you would think that some of those directors would be well aware of their responsibilities had they been trained and were aware of their fiduciary duties. Don't know.
Well, that's a very, very good point, because that is the fiduciary duty we're talking about as a director. And companies fail. I'll put my hands up. I failed in business, but not to that scale. Yeah. And I stood up and dealt with it as a conscientious person who cared. To be perfectly frank, that's the reality. But when you get these guys, it's almost like, oh well, that didn't matter. We'll just go away. And you're like, it's over £1 billion. You can't just lose £1 billion. It just fell down the back of the seat. I mean, where did it go?
Yeah, and as you say, the impact on people and on individuals is massive. I mean, if that's £4 billion come out of our industry, that's £4 billion that haven't been paid to people.
Exactly. And then you've got the tax implications and the losses to the HMRC and so forth. The out and out damage to the economy. And then you've got the CLC, the Construction Leadership Council, and I'm on the fence about these guys, to be honest, and I'm sure this will be a controversial and not very popular topic, but the reality is I don't think they actually do anything that helps the industry. I mean, I read their manifesto, and I'm like, well, all these like problems in the industry about net zero and all this stuff, all beautiful aspirational stuff, I guess. Where's the problem? Where's the real problems? Because we're talking about by 2028, the Construction Skills Network estimate that we'll be 250,000 tradespeople short, and that's not that was announced before the issue with the grandfather rights, taking away the CSCS cards. That could be double. I mean, and you're basically taking away the industry. It's almost like we're trying to destroy the industry. And you're standing there thinking, right, I mean, my strapline, I don't want to sound too much salesy here, but it's build better relationships, because it's those relationships that lead to building great projects and everybody's happy. But if we're making it difficult for people to do a job that they probably aren't even sure if they want to do anymore because they don't know if they're going to get paid for it, what are we actually doing in this industry?
Yeah.
We're literally driving off a cliff and then going, why is this happening? Yeah.
Well, we forget that people build for people, don't they? I mean, it requires people at every stage in our process.
Yeah. Well, it is the building industry.
Yeah.
Or the construction industry, we construct, we build, but for me, we shouldn't be constructing and building stuff if it means that people get destroyed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk, this has gone off on a tangent a little bit. I'm used to that, and I'm good at that, but it's all relative. So this tangent actually takes us to Qatar.
Okay.
Now, I was over in Istanbul at the SCL's, one of the conferences I attended, and it was a fascinating presentation from a lawyer from Qatar. Basically, what she was talking about was after 2022. Now, you understand this will make sense in a minute, but after 2022, their industry imploded. There was no investment. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. There was so much bad PR about all the deaths and the health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a nice place to be. Toxic, right? Okay, we understand all that. And then you look at us in the UK, we've got these issues with Grenfell, Building Safety Act, all these insolvencies. We're not really doing that much better, in my opinion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened in Qatar, to me, is fascinating because I don't know all the ins and outs, but I spoke to the presenter after it, and she explained to me that effectively the banks went in to the specialist contractors, propped them up, gave them funding to go after the main contractors to get them paid. And I was like, wow, could you imagine that in the UK?
Yeah. No, brilliant.
That would change the whole dynamic. That would really, because a lot of people will say, it's a shame for the specialist, the main contractors, they only get to make that amount of margin. You think, no, that's a choice. And you go, oh no, but if everybody just put their prices up, all of a sudden, that could be monopolies and stuff like that. You think, no, because the monopolies, so-called, I forgot the legislation now, but there's the Competitions Act and all this stuff. It's all about treating people fairly. That's what I read from it.
Yeah.
It's not about saying let's go in at that and then screw these guys. I'm pretty sure it doesn't say that anywhere in there.
Well, no.
So the point is we need legislation that actually works. So the Construction Act is where I'm at. Is we need to reform that. And I posted some polls on LinkedIn and stuff, and we got a lot. I mean, it was almost 80% plus on a lot more, 90% over to support reforms of the construction. I called it third time lucky because we've obviously had the act came out in 98. Came law in 98, sorry. Then it changed in 2011 again. And I'm saying, but third time lucky because it's not strong enough. Because the legal industry have hijacked the whole process.
Yeah. I'm just picking up on one thing, Yosof, and that's the number of insolvencies we've had. I mean, we hear the number of insolvencies that are reported are increasing. And certainly before ISG, the numbers were going up. But there were some reports out saying that actually the number of companies was also increasing within the industry. And actually we were still running at just over 1% of companies were going insolvent every year. Now, obviously that's 1%, not necessarily too many. I think it's important to have some insolvencies to get rid of the really bad players within the industry. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is we need to find ways of stopping the impact happening down the line, isn't it? That's the real challenges. If ISG are bidding below price, what we've got to find is solutions to stopping that affecting all their supply chain. Mm-hmm. Is that where project bank accounts come in? Is that something that you'd like to see more of?
Project bank accounts are a fantastic idea. There's no doubt about it. Until they're mandatory, I don't really see, the ways that how that's going to improve it. If it's done in kind of isolated areas, is what I see. And I think, that's primarily just in the public sector anyway. So that doesn't, I mean, that's a small part of the industry where you've got the private sector.
Yeah, but they're great ways of protecting actually the ultimate client. I mean, as you've rightly pointed out, the HM government's going to fund a lot of ISG's insolvencies on their public works.
Well, let's. I'm sorry to be pedantic here, but it's not the HM government. It's me and you.
Okay,
it's going to pay it. They don't have any money. They get the money from us.
No, that's true enough.
So this is it's a zero-sum game. I honestly, and I don't want to be too nihilistic because I have been a bit negative on this, but I'm just being honest. That's the thing about me. I'm pragmatic. I'm authentic. I'll tell the truth.
Yeah.
Spade's a spade for me. I was a contractor. I know what it's like to be these guys. But when you look at project bank account, in theory, it should protect. But if there's not enough money in the project, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference. Because
I'm not so sure. I think it will provide some, even if there's not enough money in the project. Mm-hmm. The supply chain aren't going to be months behind payment, which is what's happened on many of the projects.
Well, I guess so. I guess so. And sorry, I was maybe a bit harsh there when I said a blind bit of difference because it can and does help, and there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, I don't think it's a panacea, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm sure it's not a panacea.
Yeah, I think it would need to be, there needs to be some kind of mandatory or statute to support that. And again, that comes back to the reform of construction legislation. Like the construction legislation for me, I mean, there's things like, and I see it regularly in the adjudication arena, where, and I call it the arena because it is almost like being in the Colosseum these days, where I'm not kidding, there's lines.
I disagree. Adjudication's almost now arbitration light, isn't it? It was
absolutely
brought in to be swift and relatively economic, and it's gone the other way.
Well, absolutely. Hence the reason why it's like, well, a lot of people say we can potentially, put it back to what it was, and you're like, well, it should be, but the reality is the genie's out of the bottle. So we need to reform to make it a much more robust, protect the office of the adjudicator, I might add as well, because I mean some of the stuff I see, whereas and it is the big tier ones again, and the lawyers and the advisors, a lot of there's ego comes into it. There's very, very some of the nastiness. I personally have been attacked not physically, but attacked in the adjudication where I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute, what on earth is going on here? I'm not on trial. I'm here to argue a case on behalf of my representative. Imagine standing in court and screaming and shouting at your opposite advocate. You'd be thrown out of court for contempt.
Yeah.
But they do that, and then when they realise they can't get, so they have a rubbish case, and they're basically defending the indefensible, trying to get their client out of paying a bill, which to my mind, and people might not like me saying it, but that's like basically aiding and abetting a fraud, which is criminal as far as I'm concerned. So if your client gets off with paying the bill, the crime is after the fact. You helped. I know people won't like me saying that, but hey, I said it. And the other thing is, so when the lawyers can't get you on the case because there is no case to defend, they'll try all these like tricks to basically abuse the office of the adjudicator is the only way I could see it, by trying to harass them and harangue them out the gate. They'll look for anything, and I see this every time I go on starting adjudication. The lawyers will be all over my LinkedIn without a shadow of a doubt, looking for any link between me and the adjudicators. It's ridiculous. And you think, hang on a minute, would you be doing that if it was a judge? Probably not. Going into a guy's courtroom and telling him how to do his job, you would be thrown in jail. So we have that. So that there's that. So I'm saying adjudicators should be able to determine their own jurisdiction. They should be able to award costs, just the same as you do in litigation. Because the whole thing about the Construction Act was it was supposed to be about cash flow. This becomes a very expensive endeavour to get paid the money that you're entitled to anyway. And you say, well, hang on a minute. After that, then the other side can just fold it around and say, well, we're still not paying you. You then have to run off to the TCC, to a Part 8 or Part 7. And you think, well, hang on a minute. What about we change the Construction Act to make what the decision is mandatory, fully mandatory, as in you must abide by the decision, then go off and do what you like.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of going off on tangent.
No, I think the reform of the Construction Act's really quite crucial, isn't it? I mean, I hear stories about, as you say, adjudicators being challenged unnecessarily just to try and delay any rectification or any solutions to the problems which need to be solved. I mean, that's what it's there to do. It really is.
I feel sorry for adjudicators. I mean, people say to me, "You'd make a good adjudicator," and I laugh because I'm like, well, I think people know that I'm pretty pro specialist contractor. I think it'd be a bias claim, a bias on any decision I make. But the reality is, on a joking aside, it's like I feel that they literally almost have to walk on eggshells. They have to tiptoe around because they're not worried about this, worried about that, and you think, that's not right. The guy or the woman, and it's great to see more female adjudicators coming through as well. We have, like this mix of adjudicators and in the industry, and the decisions are, don't get me wrong, there's the odd dodgy decision that I'll be like, but in 18 years, I've only seen less than half a dozen. So for me, and anecdotally, all the court support, irrespective of right or wrong, the fact is it's about cash flow. So let's make it about cash flow, because when you contrast it with the insolvencies and the mental health crisis and stuff, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, as I said before, to see the issues. They're directly correlated. So let's legislate to make it harder for these guys to do that.
Yeah. So Yossef, you started off by talking about education and particularly around the specialist sectors and educating them as to their rights and how it goes about. And you've also talked about getting around 400,000 companies. How do we go about this? How do we educate, people as to their rights and the way to behave in construction?
So there's three key areas that I deal with in the program, and in terms of scaling that, we're looking at ways to have me recorded and do that so that it's an online learning program as opposed to the intensive one, and that may or may not work. But what we tend to find is what I do is we start with who is the person that's running this business. We work out what they stand for, what the values are, and then we start leadership development. It's very, very like as a proper coach-mentor relationship, but it's building up because the thing is I could tell 400,000 people on a webinar if Zoom or Teams could cope with that. Say we did I don't know 10,000 a day or whatever, and you could do that and hope that individual would understand it. But when you actually do it in a real-time, real-world situation, so we talk about the Construction Act, for example, in situations that are happening in the coaching client's business. So that there'll be issues with, give an example, somebody hasn't paid one of my clients by the final date for payment. So I'll say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to issue a Section 112 notice. Well, what's that? Well, that means you could suspend any or all of your operations 7 days from the date of when we give that notice, and there's nothing the other side can do because it's under statute. You have the lawful right to do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, right? So even things like that, as you're giving them that information to use, almost like it's kind of quasi consulting, but you're giving it in a way as do this, but it's not just do this, it's do this because, and this is what will happen. And then they see the action. Then they're a bit like Neo in the Matrix when they're like, I know Kung Fu, show me more. It is, and then so we go chapter and verse from Section 104 to 118 or whatever it is, I think it is in the Construction Act, chapter and verse of what every single one of these about the payment notices, adjudication, pay less notices, what a smash and grab. I hate that phrase, but that's what the industry calls it. What that means, a Section 111.3 breach. And they basically upskill them and knowledge transfer that, but in real time with real situations. And if they don't have any issues going on in their business, I'll take information from, because I still practice in adjudication. I've got 2 adjudications going in just now, and another 2 before the end of the week it'll start. This is what happens. So I'll tell them stories from the field, as it were, and anecdotal, obviously confidential, of course, but explain to them this is what happens, this is what's going to happen in that situation, and then once we've done that, I then take them through a real life adjudication, and actually show them what happens, and it's akin to like a Netflix season because you get to the end and it's almost a cliffhanger. So that was the referral. Okay. Oh, what did they say? Well, you have to wait till next week.
That sounds like pyramid selling to me, Yossef. That does.
Well, oh God, no. No. But the thing is, like Joe going to say, because my business is primarily or predominantly my revenue is from dispute resolution. Okay. I'm actually trying to create a business that's going to put that business, the revenue massively down. But that's because I got into this industry, to recap at the start, from my dad's business, seeing that, and I think, well, that's not the way things should be. Yeah. Somebody does a job. I joked on LinkedIn the other day about this guy came to do some joinery work. It was a made up story, as I do this sometimes, to create these wee role plays on LinkedIn for content, and I have a laugh. I'm not going to lie, I do have a laugh because that's my nature, but it's a very difficult situation. So I said, this guy came to my house. Really nice guy, just become a father. He was telling me about his new kid, and he did a great job. His price was fantastic, and he even finished on time. In fact, he finished early. Do you know what that cheeky bugger got? Went and did after that. Sorry, he did put an invoice in. How dare he put an invoice in? I tell you what, I'm not going to pay that invoice. And do you know what else? I drove over to his yard and burned it to the ground, so he won't be able to work with anybody else. And obviously it's satire.
It's all made up. Yeah.
But sorry, I've almost forgot. And I said that'll teach him to come to my house and do a great job on time for a decent price and to a great standard. And it is obviously satire, but that actually happens on a regular basis. Somebody destroys somebody's business just to get out of paying them a bill. And it's so normalized. That's why I use the content and the humor to get people to go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I've got your attention now. this is not acceptable. This is happening to you. Change it. Yeah.
Hey, also, I'm really aware of that. Yeah, we've had a great canter through Construction Act and some of the insolvency and things we do.
Yeah.
This is going to be promoted by the National Federation of Builders, which represents many of those tier ones that you're talking about, but generally they're regional, or they're not not generally the largest of the large. What would your recommendation be if you had sort of three wishes for sort of the regional contracting and sort of larger regionals? What would your wish be? What would your three advice lines be?
Three? Oh, well,
I think limit to one if you've only got one, but I was just giving you.
I'm actually more laughing at the fact that you waited until the end to tell me that about the audience.
Well, you could just summary. We covered it all already. There's end the podcast.
I'm only kidding. The thing is, and you know, on a serious note, I actually have nothing against main contractors at all. I have nothing against lawyers. There's sections of our industry, however, that need to be cut out. And I mean the practices. I don't mean people or businesses. It's just, you know, I guess probably treat people the way you expect to be treated. You know, if somebody didn't pay you as a main contractor and your employer didn't pay you, how would you feel? Now, imagine you did the actual physical work. How would you feel? You know, if you couldn't feed your family, or I had one. I'll give you an example. I had a client who came to me, and I helped a guy out massively because he couldn't afford the help. And we do that now and again, not all the time because we're a business too.
Yeah.
And long story short, the guy was literally in tears on the phone because this big builder was refusing to pay him, even though they knew they did all the work, tied them up in quantity survey and legal speech, but none of it was true. And the guy was like, came on the phone, he's actually in tears. I don't mind telling you that. The guy was in tears saying he doesn't know how he can face his wife to explain they can't pay their mortgage. That's the effect.
It does happen. I'm well aware of it.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, to me, in fact, there is one, because I spoke about it at the NEC conference in June in London. And I said, you know, like, there's a clause in NEC 3. I won't go into all the detail because I don't want to complicate it, but it's about acting in the spirit, the contract, but also in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. And I said, what if we went further than that? And I said, just be kind. You know, that's a human being's life you're dealing with. You know, so if they work for you, pay them. And if you make a mistake, accept it. Don't blame somebody else for your mismanagement. You know, there's two, three. I think two. I think we've got up to stop at two.
I think you've done well. I think you're going to treat people as you wish to be treated. Be kind. There's your second one, and recognize people make mistakes. You know, it's only human, but be accountable for the ones that you make.
Yeah, exactly.
There's your three.
You're listening, ISG.
Too late.
Sorry. Well, no, because ISG Limited is still on the go, I believe.
No. Well, Yosof, we've had a great canter through. It's been, you know, it's been a lovely to hear, you know, the view from the specialists, and really, you know, those contracts. As I said at the beginning, the contracts really, I think, define the industry when actually we do so much value and so much good that we can do. And I like your three recommendations to contractors.
I've got a fourth.
Go on then, put your fourth in then.
Sorry, I feel like Santa Claus here. Let's just go full Santa Claus.
Brilliant. There we go.
So we'll say that don't expect people to sign up to contracts that neither you nor they understand. Yeah. Because the only person that benefits from that is the person who fixes the dispute.
Yeah. There we go.
There you go. I've got the hat on now for Christmas.
Santa Claus hat being worn. Yeah, there. Well, that's great. Okay, perfect. Well, Yosof, thank you very much indeed, and we wish you luck, and we look forward to hearing once you've got around your 400,000 contractors.
Well, here's hoping. Now, listen, Mark, I really appreciate you having me on, and you know, best wishes to all your listeners and all the builders in the industry. Look after each other.
Absolutely, all the best. Thanks very much, Yosof.
Thank you. Cheers.